Hello, I'm here to tell you about my 10 favorite works of translated fiction. I've organized this into languages, which has made me realize that there's only 4 languages here, so if you have any recommendations for fiction that has been translated into English that is not one of these 4 languages, I would love that. Please help me broaden my horizons. The first language is Japanese, and we have 2 books here. First being The Factory by Hiroko Oyamada. This was translated by David Boyd. This is sort of a surrealist satire on capitalism and the workplace. It follows 3 employees in this uber exaggerated factory that takes up many city blocks and becomes the entire life of the people working at it. It really makes you get in the head of the character and feel like this meaningless cog in a machine, doing what feels like meaningless labor. Like, one of them shreds paper, the other one does copy editing for things that make absolutely no sense, like papers that just show up. They don't know where they end up going. It really just feels like he's doing it for nothing, just the paycheck. And then the other one is doing experiments and creating a research proposal about covering the roofs of the buildings in the factory in moss. Though it doesn't end up leading to much, it's quite tense through the whole thing, and it does this thing where it shifts really abruptly from scene to scene and makes you feel quite disoriented trying to figure out where you are in time and space. And it's very short, really quick read, and deals with topics that I see a lot in Japanese literature about being dehumanized because of the society you live in and the expectations placed on you by your work and your friends and your family. And that kind of leads us into the next one, which is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. This was translated by Ginny Tapley Takamori. I just don't know where to begin. What do you say about Earthlings? First of all, look how cute the cover is. It's so cute. The book's so cute. Such a cute book. You should read it because it's so cute. Earthlings follows the life of a young woman. It starts when she's a little girl, and she is very different. She thinks that she's an alien, totally convinced that her and her cousin, who she's in love with, are aliens. And she maintains this belief throughout her entire life. So her and her cousin are in love, and they can only see each other during the summers. And then some crazy shit goes down, and she doesn't see him for many years. When she's a grown adult, she ends up reconnecting with him, and I just don't want to say anything. It is so deeply disturbing, so transgressive, so taboo in every way that it possibly could be, but it is also saying a lot at the same time. It's not just weird and gross to be those things. It is making this really strong social commentary that I love. I love it in all of Sayaka Murata's work. I think that she just handles the themes that she does with such strangeness, but also grace at the same time. The next language we have is French, which is not a language I speak, despite the fact that I have lived my entire life in Canada. First up on that list is My Armenian Friend by Andreï, makine, which was translated by Jeffrey Strahan. I can't believe that this is making it onto a list because I read this book because the cover is ridiculous. I read it for a video about reading ugly books, and I ended up really enjoying it, and I thought it was a great translation. It's about 2 young boys growing up in Siberia in the 70s and 80s, and it's just really about their relationship and about the narrator discovering who he is and what his ideologies are through his interactions with his friend. It's a beautiful portrait of these 2 young men. It's a very human book. It really does grapple with what it means to be human in a really interesting and philosophical way that is not tedious or annoying. And the writing is a little bit dense, and a little bit it reads like a classic, but in a way that is so good. It just shows you so much skill of the writer and of the translator. And it's a really quick read with really short chapters. I ripped through it. I fell in love with these characters and this story, and I learned quite a bit about the social climate of Siberia. Then we have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This was translated from French by Roz Schwartz. I just read this. My little stickies are still in it because I just am so lazy about writing the quotes down. This is fantastic. This was so good. This is almost a 5-star read, but it doesn't have chapters, so I just could not grant it those 5 stars because of that. This is about a young woman who is imprisoned in a bunker with 40 other women. She is a lot younger than everybody else, and she has only really known a life inside this bunker. And it's about the dynamics between the characters. It's about how this woman who has been trapped with no access to culture or the outside world, how she would grow up, what she would think about the world, the kinds of questions that she would ask. It's so interrogative and insightful and investigative. Oh my god, all these I words. And it's so smart in its analysis, while also being quite tender at times. The story is crazy and devastating, and I love the way that it's told because the narrator is telling it from the perspective of herself as an older woman. She's telling her story, and she gives you these little hints that really do tell you what happens, but it leaves enough out to make you want more and want to know exactly how the pieces connect. But you also know that the final tone of the story is going to be how she describes it, and still part of you the storytelling little baby in your heart thinks, well, maybe something will happen. Maybe it'll end differently. Wow, it's so masterful. I loved it. The next language is Korean, and the first book on this list is On the Origin of Species and Other Stories by Bo Young Kim, translated by Sora Kim Russell and Jongmin Lee Comfort. I think those are their names. I was right. This is a collection of science fiction short stories. It's one of the best translations I've ever read. The translation is so good. It really does feel like you're reading something that was originally in English. Like much of sci-fi, this really questions what it means to be human and what it is to be alive in a world of technology. I love the premise of each and every story. The first story is about this man who is in an online RPG game, and one of the employees of the company that runs the game has been sent in to ask him to leave because they're trying to close the game, but they can't shut down the servers until all of the players have left, and he's the last one holding out. And it's about them having this very human argument in this very weird video game setting, and the man who's in the game who won't leave refuses to acknowledge that he's in a game. So it's very frustrating to have a conversation with him. If you're into sci-fi, I would highly recommend this. I don't love genre fiction, so it bored me a little bit, but that was not because of the quality of the writing or the themes that it was exploring. It was just because it's not really my book, but I could recognize the objective greatness of it. Next on the list is Concerning My Daughter by Kim Hye-jin, which was translated by Jamie Chang. This is about a mother and a daughter. It's told from the mother's perspective, and she cannot accept her daughter's lifestyle. It goes against everything that she believes in, and she struggles with it so much. Her daughter is gay, and she's incredibly prejudiced, and she's also really fearful of what this means for her life because she has these such traditional beliefs. She thinks that her daughter cannot succeed or be happy without a husband and kids. She also works in a nursing home where she sees all of these elderly patients who are totally alone, and that's the life that she's expecting for her daughter if she does not have a husband and kids to take care of her when she's old. I think this book does a fantastic job of making you empathize with a woman who is cruel. It doesn't sugarcoat her actions, but it's also kind and generous towards her without excusing what she does and what she believes. And I think that's because this was written by a woman trying to write a story from her own mother's perspective, which is such a beautiful concept and done so well. It just humanizes a person that you could so easily just write off as a bigot. I thought that the ending was done really well, and it didn't cheapen the story or make everything up to the point that it ended redundant. The mother's progress was realistic. It wasn't just some beautiful happy ending where everything turns out right and she says sorry and she never believes any of the things that she used to believe again. Just a beautiful concept, beautifully written and beautifully translated. Okay, last we have what seems to be my favorite language, which is Spanish. I love literature from South America, specifically Argentina for whatever reason. Every time I read a book from Argentina, I'm like, okay, fuck yeah. I just feel like the literature is so, it has all the strangeness that I love, and it handles the themes that it does just with beauty and weird plots. First, we have The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enríquez, which was translated by Megan McDowell. I'm going to try not to talk about this too much because I feel like I've talked about it in every single video that I've ever made. This is a collection of short stories, mostly about women in Argentina. It's weird. It's gross. It's not afraid to be totally fucking disgusting sometimes. Like poop. Like cannibalism. A lot of it is about women's reactions to the violence against them at the interpersonal level and the societal level. It's about mental illness hugely, and it is so weird, and it definitely treats these women as strange, but it does so with a lot of tenderness and empathy. And every story in this has a fascinating premise that you just want to get to the bottom of, though it doesn't always wrap itself up super neatly at the end of each story. Some of them do feel like they are leading up to not much, but it's still enjoyable nonetheless. Next, we have A Little Luck by Claudia Piñeiro, which was translated by Frances Riddle. This is about a woman who's from Argentina, but she moves as far away as she can, I think to Boston, because of an incident that happens that she feels at fault for and that her community completely ostracizes her for. She leaves her husband and her son behind, and she has no contact with them whatsoever, and she spends her life thinking about the son that she's lost. She ends up being sent back to her hometown on a job, and it's just her having to face everything that she's been avoiding for 20 years. The story unfolds in such an interesting way. Claudia Piñeiro is a fantastic storyteller, and it really shows in this book. You're given these little pieces, and you just want more, and you just can't stop reading. It's so fast-paced because you just want to learn more, even though there's not necessarily a ton in the way of plot. It was so good, it convinced me that I wanted to read everything by Claudia Piñeiro. Up next is Paradais by Fernanda Melchor, which I've been saying wrong in all my videos, and I've talked about this a lot, so I'm going to try not to talk about it too much. This was translated by Sophie Hughes. This is about two young men in Mexico, and they're very, very disillusioned, and they really think that they're owed anything they want from women. One of them is rich, one of them is very poor. There's a really interesting struggle with class in this book and exploration of class dynamics in Mexico. This whole book leads up to this violent crime that the men are planning, and even though the true violence doesn't come until the end, it's very visceral and violent in the language throughout the whole thing, and it's so disturbing and uncomfortable to read. Like, I don't want to say I enjoyed it because that seems fucked up, but like I did. Like, I really, 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 really liked this book. I love Melchor's writing style with the urgency of the run-on sentences. It's so upsetting, and I think that she really, really gets into the head of these fucked up young men. Last on this list is another Claudia Piñeiro, translated by Frances Riddle, and that is Elena Knows. This was a bit of a hard read for me. Just personally, the Parkinson's, a little bit too close to home. I want a little bit more distance from that. Thank you very much. Elena Knows is about a woman, Elena, whose daughter hangs herself in a church. And she is absolutely convinced that her daughter could not have done this. So she is going on this trip that should not take that long, but she is debilitated by her Parkinson's disease. She's going on this trip to call in a favor to find this woman who she thinks will help her figure out what really happened to her daughter. This is very much about life in a body with Parkinson's. If that sounds hard to read to you, maybe skip this one because it was very, very, very hard to read. It's both plot heavy and character heavy, and all the characters are super vivid and complex. I love a book that doesn't shy away from showing a dead character in like not just a flattering light. Her daughter was fucking neurotic and mean and cruel and 100 other things. This is called like a mystery or a crime novel, which it kind of is, but it's so much more a character study and social commentary, but it maintains that fast pace of a mystery or a crime novel that just like you can't take your eyes off of it. And I think that it wrapped up beautifully. I think that the answers that we got were perfectly fitting with the story, even though they were hard to bear. And this book has yet again convinced me that I love Piñeiro's work and that she's one of the best storytellers that I've ever read. What is wrong with you? That is all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. If you have any recommendations for translated works, please let me know. Thank you. Goodbye.